I'm glad you're here, and you're in for a treat today. We have with us one of our professors here at Bluegrass Community and Technical College. This is Professor James Goode, and he's going to share with us today some information about the Melungeons, and then he's also going to share about Jessie Stewart's book entitled The Daughter of the Legend, which relates to the Melungeons. And then I have asked him to speak a little bit about some of his published works. And I believe he was just at a book signing this past weekend. And so I feel that this is a great honor to have him to speak with us today. And we want to welcome Professor James Goode.
Thank you, sir. How many of you have heard the word Melungeon? Anybody? What do you know about it? What do you know about Melungeons?
They come from different backgrounds.
All right, so they have a sort of different racial mix backgrounds. Anybody else know anything else about it?
They have blue eyes and dark hair.
They do. They do. They have coal black hair, wavy, and cobalt blue eyes. Anything else you know about them? Do you know where they live? Primarily. If you went looking for Melungeons, where would you find them? Would you find them in Lexington?
No.
Probably.
Eastern Kentucky.
Eastern Kentucky, Southwest Virginia, and in East Tennessee. There's a large group of them in East Tennessee. There is some debate about the origin of Melungeon, and we'll talk about that, but what prompted all this is an interview that I did several years ago with Kentucky Educational Television, and it aired, every now and then they'll air it, periodically they'll air it and bring it back up. I think your instructors have to see the interview. I was talking about many things related to the Melungeons, but one thing I was talking about was this novel. How many of you know who Jessie Stewart is? Okay, he was a very famous Kentucky writer. He and I shared a birthday, by the way, August the 8th. He was born in 1911 and died in the 1980s. He published over 60 books in his lifetime. He was very prolific. And he not only published novels, as this one is, he also published short stories. He published 2,500 short stories in major magazines. He's also a poet. Published several thousand poems in his lifetime. As a matter of fact, his first two books were both books of poetry. The only genre that he did not write was drama. He didn't do drama. But although there have been dramas done based upon him. But I knew him very well. I met him when I was a student about your age. And Jessie was very interested in promoting young writers. I was a young aspiring poet, and he developed an interest in me that lasted his entire life. We corresponded with one another all the way up through the 1980s. So I've got a huge box of letters and things from Jessie Stewart. And I became a collector of his books. The first time a book is published is called a first edition. And I have a huge collection of first edition books. What I'm going to do is pass this around for you to see while I'm talking about Melungeons. And in the book, there is a signature and a date. This book was published in 1965. He wrote it in 1942, but it wasn't published in 1965, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, why there was a huge gap between the time he wrote it and the time it was published. And this was signed in October of 1970, so it was about 5 years after this book was published. So I'll pass that around so you can see it. I took the dust jacket off because the dust jacket is very old and it gets chipped if you let it up, so I took it off for that reason. Melungeon people are considered to be what are called tri-isolate people, meaning that they don't live in a broad sense of the word all over the United States. They live in only about 3 areas in the United States, and that is, we just mentioned Southwest Virginia, East Kentucky, and East Tennessee. And here is a Melungeon family, picture that I found on the internet of a Melungeon family. And if you'll notice the father in particular, he has really distinct features, facial features. Notice the high cheekbones and the darker hair, dark skin, a lot of these Melungeon people wore mustaches for some reason. I don't know the exact reason for that, but they did. And then you'll notice the children of this family, that they look black. Some of them look black, but they lack African features. A lot of them lack African features. I suppose that this girl probably has the closest African features, but if you look at these other kids, they have the dark skin, but their features aren't African at all. So that means that they have other kinds of racial mixes in their blood. And we really don't know. The term Melungeon has become a blanket term for mixed race. And you may or may not know, there's all kinds of political implications to mixed race. At one point, if you were part African, then you could vote. And so they used what are called euphemisms, which are terms that we apply if we don't want to use the term. For example, we don't want to say somebody's pregnant. We say they have a duck in the oven. That's a euphemism, right? Or there's an airplane in the hangar. Or, you know, we use all kinds of terms that are called euphemisms. So Melungeon almost becomes a euphemism. It means mixed race of some kind. We're not sure. But it was easier for you to be able to vote if you called yourself a Melungeon as opposed to an African, for example, at one point in our history. So, because of the mixed blood, there is difficulty placing these groups of people into specific racial groups. In other words, they may fit in more than one racial group. There may be Native American mixed with African American, or it may be Portuguese mixed with some other kind of racial mix. It may be all three together. And we're not really sure, because again, it's a broad term that's applied to these people. So they become what are known as mysterious people. We don't know much about them. Look at this picture of this Melungeon young man and his brother probably. Look how dark he is, but look at his features. His features are distinctly Anglo, but he has the dark skin. There are a lot more of them than you would think. And the current statistic that I was able to find says that there are about 50,000 of them in 22 million people who live in this area that we mentioned. So out of the 22 million people who live in Southwest Virginia, East Kentucky, Eastern Tennessee, about 50,000 of those can trace their origins to Melungeon. So that's a pretty significant number, actually. They tend to live in enclaves. They tend to be sort of cliquish. They live in groups in places. And for example, in East Tennessee, there's a ridge called the Powell Mountain, and there's a place called Newman's Ridge on Powell Mountain, and there's a whole enclave of them who live up there together. One of the reasons that they become isolated is because that one of every 6 babies born is born with black skin. And they're also called, by the way, we found that one of the students yesterday mentioned that there's some reference to blue blood. Some of you may have heard that. And that has to do with, it's really a genetic thing. And they have a special set of diseases that are particular to this group of people that most people don't get. Of course, black people have to worry about sickle cell anemia, right? So the Melungeons have a set of medical characteristics that are not generally applied to everybody. This lady over here, do you recognize that racial mix? What does she look like? Maybe Hispanic, this one? She really looks more Creole to me. You know what Creole is? Creole is, the French were exiled from Nova Scotia by the British. The French occupied Nova Scotia in the beginning, and then the British came in and took it over, and they exiled all the French. That's how the French got into Louisiana. The British just came in one day, loaded them up all on boats, and some of them had to walk all the way from Nova Scotia to Louisiana. So that's how the French got into Louisiana, and then they intermarried with some black people, Indians, and so forth, and created what's called Creole. So she really looks more Creole to me. She has these sort of Creole features. What does this lady look like? What do you think the racial mix might be of her? What does she tend to favor more? What about Native American? She sort of looks more Native American. Now, she looks distinctly different than this lady, right? Okay. So this gives us some reason to talk. This lady has much more fair skin, but look at her. Look at one of her children. How dark skinned that kid is. So the whole idea that one of every so many kids born to the Melungeons born black, it's in the genetics. It comes out, they may have a light skinned child and a very dark skinned child. This is a map of the area. Anybody know where Middlesboro, Kentucky is? It's right on the Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia border, southeast Kentucky, extreme southeast Kentucky. And if you turn at Middlesboro, headed toward La Follette, Tennessee, there is a ridge that you'll notice on your right. It's a very tall escarpment. If you fly over it, and I've done it many times, there'll be mountains, very tall mountains, all of a sudden it just drops straight off. And it's flat all the way to Knoxville. And so this is what we're talking about, the Powell Mountain, and then here's Newman's Ridge. It's up in the Powell Mountain. So it's not only are these people isolated, but they're isolated geographically from other people. They live up in this little place on top of this mountain